have Harley Smith with us. And Harley is a true cannabis connoisseur, plant scientist. He does some things, and he's going to talk about tonight, about really having a specific methodology and really just spoon feeding your plant. Take a bunch of notes here. What we're going to talk about is real serious, and he's really going to educate a ton of us out there on what you should be doing throughout the 2020 season to grow some really nice hemp out there. So without further ado, let's bring a special guest on that we have tonight, Harley Smith. How you doing, brother? Good to see you.
Doing good. Good to be here.
Anything that I left out that maybe the audience should know about you?
I have been doing this for a while. I have been asking questions and growing plants and learning about the science and the needs of plants for 25 years and during my career, and unlocking some of the secrets of nature. Nature has all of the answers if you know where to look. So there are things that we can do, and just giving the plants a nudge in the right direction. We can do things to help activate the enzymes in the plants, get better root strike, better establishment, improve quality and yield, steer the crop. All those things just by making very small changes to the way that we're feeding our plants.
So then this methodology would not be, let's go to the local big box store, the cooperative, wherever you're buying, say, agricultural products, fertilizers and things like that for the farmer, say, that's growing corn, cotton, peanuts, tomatoes, things like that would be conducive to Alabama and our southeast part of the country. So it's not just going buying Miracle-Gro and throwing it on there and you're good?
Well, you can do it. I mean, you can throw it on your NPK, broadcast your fertilizer, give it nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. Hopefully there's enough calcium and magnesium in your soil. Hopefully the weather cooperates. You can get a crop, but is it going to be the best of the best? No, I don't think so. Nature has the answers, but it also throws us some curveballs too. But if we understand the needs of the plant, we can meet them with what they do in agriculture too. It's precision agriculture. It's not over-fertilizing. Over-fertilizing is a huge mistake. It can hurt the quality of your crop. If you overdo it with nitrate nitrogen, for example, a lot of corn, you gotta have nitrogen. They throw on extra nitrogen. Well, you get the big growth, but you get big cells with thin cell walls. It makes the crop more susceptible to pest and disease, more susceptible to powdery mildew and molds, which can be a problem when you're getting into hemp growing. So you're better off spoon feeding. Give the plant everything it needs in a base nutrient, have a good quality soil with organic matter, but then if they do get a little bit of deficiency, just give it what it's deficient in, that one element, they'll come right back. So we can get better quality by not over-fertilizing.
And keep in mind, too, that the majority of people that may be watching this are most likely new farmers. And so it's their first year, 2020, growing. They'd never even touched this plant before. One, because it's been illegal, but they're brand new to the program. We have some farmers on with us that have been here for 2019, some successful, some not. And because we have to suppress 0.3 on the THC side in order for it to qualify as industrial hemp, there are probably a million factors, maybe not a million, but close to a million factors, that could spike THC levels. We're trying to do something, in my opinion, that is natural in this plant and where it's derived from as far as its strains, the cultivars in the last, let's just say 12, 15 years, and the CBD side. We're not growing the industrial hemp like in India from World War II. In the 40s and so forth. This plant is much different. These strains are coming from really the TH side, the recreational, the medicinal use values of the states that are legal for medical use, recreational. And a lot of this is being genetically bred out or to try to suppress the THC, which even makes it tougher. And one of the things that we've talked about before is in our state, we test for total THC. From your perspective, and I know I probably jumped the gun, but I heard this from you before a billion times, that there's 17 essential elements to really be able to spoon feed this plant in order to have the best opportunity possible to grow great plant material. So from your perspective and knowing your teachings in the past, What can we do to talk about that as far as the essentials? And it's not just getting a specific fertilizer from the store or using the salt-based type for, unless you're doing hydro growing, but for organic growing, what should these farmers be looking at? Like, walk me through the baby steps from the very beginning. I know nothing about it. Teach me how to grow great cannabis tonight.
Okay, well, that's pretty wide open. But the first thing, my advice, if you're just starting up a farm, is try to get set up for fertigation, where you have your irrigation lines, where you can add your nutrients, or you can add your organic biostimulants, so that they go directly to the roots of the plant and spread out in the root zone. That will reduce some of the risk too, because there's some things that we can do with fertigation that we can't do just by broadcasting fertilizers on the field and hope for the best, hope that the mineral will be there when it needs it. So to start with, well, obviously genetics. There's no substitute for genetics. If you have a cultivar that is a high THC cultivar and low CBD, you're not going to be able, just by fertilizing and fertigation, flip the balance of cannabinoids. So you need to have seeds that are specifically produced through breeding to be high CBD and naturally low in CBD. The genetics, there's metabolic pathways in the plant that will change the CBDs into THC. And if there's a cultivar where that pathway naturally in the seed is inhibited, you have a much better chance of it coming in. So you want to start out with the best quality seeds you can. I worked with hemp growers for 2 seasons out in Oregon. The first season, a lot of it was coming in hot with too much THC, because they were buying seeds from someone who said, "Oh yeah, these are the best seeds," and maybe it wasn't a scam. Maybe they thought they were high CBD and low THC. But here's one thing: if they did the breeding in a greenhouse coverings will filter out the UVB, the UV rays that give you a sunburn or a suntan. UVB stimulates the production of THC, but it depresses or suppresses the production of CBD. So maybe in indoors or maybe in the greenhouse, they said, "Oh yeah, not too much." Then you bring it outside in full sunshine, and where's all this THC coming from? So it might not have been purposeful scam, but make sure you have a good source, a trusted source for the seed. That's number one.
Good.
Number two is, I recommend highly that you inoculate the seeds or the seedlings or the clones that you're starting from. If you start with clones are genetically identical to the mother plant. So if it's a female plant, it's what you want. You don't want male plants. Then every clone taking from that mother will be female. There are some seeds that are all female seeds, but even those, even the good ones, there's going to be a few that are going to come out males. Nature finds a way. There's going to be several per acre that are going to be hermaphrodites, male and female. So you got to get a really good trusted source and learn how to, as early as possible, do your scouting to make sure you don't have males. So that's first. And then when you plant, the very first thing I would recommend is inoculate with plant growth promoting rhizobacteria and mycorrhizal fungi. Because, go ahead.
I was going to say, just with mycorrhiza alone, that's like, you got to have that, right? I mean, just that alone. I mean, explain to people what that does to the root zone, because it's fascinating what it does. It's amazing.
Well, mycorrhiza, myco is fungus. Rhiza means root. So mycorrhizal fungi are fungi that infect the roots of the plant in a beneficial way. Now, the main benefit, and there's lots of benefits from it, but the main benefit is phosphorus. unlocking phosphorus from the soil, especially if you're doing organic gardening. If you have rock phosphate, if you have bone meal that you're adding, it's not very soluble. In nature, if there's a phosphorus deficiency in infertile soils, plants will actually send out signal molecules to attract the mycorrhizal fungi. The fungi infects the roots in a beneficial way, and then as the mycelium, the little threads from the fungi, grow in the root zone, as they're growing, they produce organic acids and enzymes that unlock phosphorus from the soil, unlock phosphorus from organic matter, and feed it directly to the roots. Plants will trade their carbohydrates. They'll leak the sugars from their roots to get phosphorus in return. So that is the main benefit of the mycorrhizae. So if you're doing organic plant nutrition, first thing, even inoculating the seeds even, before you even plant it, would make a difference. Along with it, when you're adding the microbial inoculant, it's a really good idea to do a combination of humic acid and kelp extract, right along with the inoculant. I mean, some of the inoculants out there, they already put it in, but add that to it. The 5 parts humic acid, 2 parts kelp.
There is a reason why 5 to 2 is important. You wouldn't just use kelp or just the acid. It works in relation, doesn't it?
Yeah, you could use either one. I mean, it'd be beneficial, but 5 to 2 ratio will work 50% better than either of those products alone. The kelp extracts are like the signal. They have hormones that will stimulate more lateral root growth and more root mass. The humic acid will add beneficial trace elements and aid with the uptake of some of the trace elements that turn on the enzymes inside the plant that protect the plant. So putting the two together, you have the signal from the kelp, you have the amplifier from the humic acid. Put the two together, it's a boombox. It's going to make a noticeable difference. And if you get more lateral root growth and more root mass right from the beginning, there's going to be more surface area for the microorganisms to colonize. And that is going to make a huge difference for your plants. You get a sponge of roots right from the beginning. They'll be able to more efficiently take up water and minerals. And the more efficiently plants take up water and minerals, the more chemical reactions they can do, the more sugars they produce, the higher Brix.
This plants like your body are a machine, right? So when you say, for instance, they take in carbon dioxide, they convert to photosynthesis, the exudates, which is what you were alluding to before as far as the sugars feeding the microbes. Explain that real quick to the new farmers, why that circle of life is so important. Why the hell is it so important below the crown or in the root zone? What's happening there? Why is it so important to know that? Why is it that it's important in the relationship under the soil? Because nobody knows what's happening there. You know what's happening there. Science knows what's happening there. I don't know what the hell that's happening there. Why is it so important?
Yeah, well, science still doesn't know what's happening. We know that much of what's going on below our feet. Yeah. Well, what we're able to do for the first time in the history of agriculture, we can harvest microorganisms from the most fertile soils, from disease-suppressive soils too. We can grow those microbes, we can raise them, and then we can feed them to our own plants, the own roots. It's like creating a dream team. But why it's so important, I'll give you one example. If you overdo it with nitrate nitrogen, okay, it takes 20 to 30% of the energy of photosynthesis just to assimilate the nitrates, whether the plant needs them or not. So if you overdo it with nitrate nitrogen fertilizer, then you'll get big top growth, but it restricts the root growth. It does the opposite. It burns off the energy, the carbohydrates for growth, but then there's not extra sugars made from the sun to ship to the roots. So it restricts the root growth. And if you restrict the root growth, when you get in later on to warm times of the year, you're going to have a hard time with drought. And then you could have, wow, look how big my plants are, and then they just start to collapse when they have a little bit of drought. What we want is smaller cells with thicker cell walls that store the water, that store the nutrients, that can be released when the plant needs it the most. So that's just one example. So if you have an enthusiastic community of microorganisms, number one, especially mycorrhizae, that unlocks phosphorus. But you want to add some bacteria with it. There are phosphorus solubilizing bacteria. They'll hitch a ride on the threads from the mycorrhizal fungi. That mycorrhizal fungi is going to increase the root zone, the surface area, by hundreds or even thousands of times. But then as they're growing, the phosphorus solubilizing bacteria hitch a ride, get to places they could never swim to on their own. Then they swim in the soil solution, unlock phosphorus from places the fungi can't get to. Feed it to the fungi feeds it to the plant. It's part of that circle of life. And phosphorus is one of the limiting factors in soil. And there are also nitrogen fixers that will take nitrogen out of the air and change it into fertilizer for the plant right on the surface of the roots. So they're providing nitrogen for the microbes that are making phosphorus available. They're feeding each other while they're feeding the plant. I get excited about this.
I get excited, brother. I love it. I love it. So
the nature has been doing this without our help for millions of years. And now we're finally at this stage in the history of agriculture, we can harness some of that power of nature in ways that we've never been able to do. We'll be able to cut our fertilizers in half. We'll be able to increase quality and yield and protect the environment at the same time. That's a good day.
Outside of nitrogen
news for the farmers. You can, every time the price of oil goes up, the price of nitrate fertilizer goes up. You can cut that back and not sacrifice yield. Actually increase yields. Letting nature do part of that job for you. That's money in your pocket. In hydroponics, we would provide, without any bacteria to help us out, we provided about 90% of the nitrogen in the nitrate form, and no more than about 10% in the ammonium form. Now, in nature, it's a little different because there's microorganisms that'll convert ammonium into nitrites, and then other microbes that change nitrates into nitrates, and the plant takes them up. So it's more of a slow release. Also, the microorganisms eat first, and the leftovers go to the plant. So microbes need nitrogen, and they need carbon. Now, the microbes rarely die of old age. Other microorganisms eat the bacteria, and then they use the nitrogen for their needs.
Gotcha.
It's in the bacteria, and then the extra they spit out, and that's available nitrogen for the plant. So it sequesters the nitrogen in the root zone, keeps it from washing away with the first big rain, and then it becomes available to the plant more when the plant needs it more.
So in the beginning, in growing, right, we have NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Nitrogen, like you've said in the past, is the growth element of the plant. Mm-hmm. Why is that so important? Can you overfeed nitrogen? How often do you need to feed nitrogen for?
Yeah, when you're spoon feeding, you have more control when you're doing fertigation with the nitrogen that you're providing the plant. In the first half of a plant's life, that's when they assimilate most of the nitrogen, say 80% of the nitrogen that they need for the whole life of the plant. Wow. If you overdo it, like a lot of farmers have done for years, they'll add a lot of nitrate nitrogen, but over half of that's going to get washed away from the root zone. It's less than 50% efficient, and the plant won't be able to use it then. Where if you're spoon feeding the plant and you have the microbes, then the nitrogen becomes more available as they need it. Now, if you get a big surge of extra nitrate nitrogen, over 20% of the energy of photosynthesis, like we just said, goes to just to assimilate nitrogen. It's a luxury element. You give it more nitrogen, it assimilates that too. You'll say, okay, let's give it some more. It'll assimilate that. But you can overdo it with nitrogen in hemp, could delay or even prevent flowering.
Wow.
We want to have a fast, when the plant gets to the right stage, when it gets into flowering, we want a fast curve from vegetative to flowering stage, and we don't want to hold back the flowering process. Remember, we're growing flowers. We're not growing leaves. We don't
Right.
need a whole lot of green leaves. What we need is nice tight internodal length with an abundance of flowers and stress-free flowers, so that the THC isn't enhanced too much.
How about for phosphorus? What do we got to do with phosphorus?
Well, there's two places where phosphorus is very important during the plant cycle, growth cycle. One is early on. Phosphorus is the energy element. It energizes rooting of the plant for better root strike and establishment. Also, a little bit later on, early in flowering, phosphorus stimulates earlier flowering and more flowering sites. So there's a place where we can add a little bit more phosphorus. Now, of course, in organic growing, we can't just say, oh, let's give it some monoammonium phosphate, because it's not certified organic. Mm-hmm. That's why it's so important to inoculate your roots right from the beginning, so that the plant can take up enough phosphorus to get improve the rooting. And that's why you're seeing the results. When you do that, if they get better root growth, they're not just taking up phosphorus, they're taking up water and all the other minerals more efficiently as well. So it's going to have a downstream effect on the quality of your crop. So that's one of the, phosphorus to me is the limiting factor in organics. Even if the soil has enough phosphorus, it locks up. It locks up with calcium. It locks up with sulfates. It's very slowly available to the plant. So sometimes you add rock phosphate, it's really not going to do much for the plant for 2 or 3 seasons. Well, wow. We've got to, we want to get a crop that first season too. So if we have a enthusiastic community of microorganisms and we have a really good pH of the soil, might as well say something there too. 6.4 to 6.5 pH, that's the best pH zone for phosphorus availability to the plant. That's why we don't want it too low or too high, because again, that will make phosphorus less available to the plant. Phosphorus solubilizing bacteria though, mycorrhizal fungi, the right amounts of the right pH will be able to steer your crop right from the very beginning.
Beautiful. How about potassium?
Potassium. Potassium is the health element, and hemp takes up a lot of potassium. They are a nutrient hog. They take up a lot of calcium. They take up a lot of potassium, even more than corn does.
Wow.
So, but when they need it, they need adequate, of course, potassium all the way through. But where they need it the most is during heavy flowering. They can, if they're taking up, they can deplete potassium to deficient levels when they're really putting on weight with flowers in a matter of a few days. And even if you don't see signs of potassium deficiency, you can develop what's called a hidden hunger, where the plants will start to stall. Because potassium is responsible for carbohydrate metabolism, to unlock some of the stored sugars that are in the roots so they can be transported to the flowers, be stored, and used for growth. It's actually used during metabolism and during photosynthesis too, for carbohydrate metabolism. So if they get a deficiency, they can't replace what they already took up, they can stall out. Just one little, if you're doing fertigation, add some potassium sulfate to it. The potassium will be immediately available within hours or within a day or so. They'll unstall the plant. The sugars will spark the carbohydrate metabolism, and it'll flow to the flowers. They'll fill in again. Very important for quality. Potassium is the quality element.
And does it also, like say with potassium, are there other signs of deficiency that look like potassium but are really something else?
It could be. Potassium, I can recognize it pretty easily though. If you're seeing visual symptoms, it shows up, normally starts at near the bottom of the plant, not always, but usually, and you'll see the edges of the leaves will the margins will start to turn brown, and the yellowing will go from the outside of the leaf, start yellowing in toward the center of the leaf.
Mm-hmm.
And you might even, as it gets worse, maybe even see some brown spots developing on the leaf. Those are visual symptoms. But before you even see those symptoms, the plant could already be getting the potassium deficiency with the hidden hunger. The idea there is, even if your soil has a lot of potassium, in the clay soils that we have out west a lot, I do the soil analysis. It says, oh, look, there's lots of potassium, but a lot of it's locked up with the clay. And in the summertime, when it starts to dry out, the clay will start to shrink. That's where you see the cracks in the clay soil sometimes.
Yes.
It starts to shrink, and then it holds on to the potassium. So even if there's a lot of potassium in the soil, you can still get a potassium deficiency. So I just look ahead. I plan ahead and say, all right, we're getting into that stage of flowering. I'm going to add some potassium along with my water and fertilizer to make sure they don't stall out.
And then how important then, outside of those three, how important is calcium and magnesium? And why is it called CalMag? Why do you see it in CalMag forms? Do they just go hand in hand?
Yeah, they do balance each other. You know, you want 3 to 5 times the amount of calcium as magnesium. There's 3 elements that are positively charged. Remember, you're talking about all this positive and negative charged elements, right?
Right.
Well, the 3 main positively charged elements: potassium, calcium, and magnesium. And those 3 elements balance each other out. So if you have too much potassium, the potassium toxicity will show up as a magnesium deficiency. So if you're overdoing it with potassium, before you just add more CalMag, or before you add more Epsom salts, back off on the potassium, and then just give them a little bit of what they're deficient in. So you don't want to just treat symptoms. You want to treat the cause. Same thing with calcium to magnesium ratio. You want 3 to 5 times the calcium as the magnesium, typically, so that it buffers. If you don't have enough calcium, too much magnesium, then you can get too much magnesium uptake, and that could show up as potassium deficiency. See, those 3 elements are balancing each other. If you add one or the other, it'll reduce the uptake of one of the other 3, like on a balance.
And what does calcium do? Why is that so important in this whole equation?
Oh yeah, to me, calcium is king. Calcium ions, when they're taken up, calcium forms the glue that glues the cell walls together. It's called pectin, calcium pectate. And hemp takes up more calcium than most plants. That's one of the things that sets it aside a little bit. Another one, like cucumbers take up a lot of calcium.
Do they?
But cannabis takes up more calcium than even something, a vegetable like cucumber.
So by strengthening the cell walls, you're creating a stronger plant.
The plant takes up. I'm going to back off one to answer. I'll answer that question.
Sure.
A little background here. There are microorganisms on the roots of the plant that some of them make digestive enzymes. And one of those enzymes is called a protease. It breaks down proteins into the building blocks of proteins. They're called amino acids. Mm-hmm. Now, 2 of the amino acids, glutamic acid and glycine, literally stimulate root cells to open up calcium ion channels. Now, calcium is passive. It's only taken up with the water as the plant's taking it up from the roots, transpiring water vapor from the leaves. But if you get the glutamic acid and glycine, instead of 1 ion at a time going into the root, open up an ion channel, 1,000 calcium ions at a time are pulled up. Then you get more calcium uptake, you get more calcium pectate, it reacts with pectic acid. That's the glue that glues the cell walls together. Now, here's why it helps with powdery mildew or prevention of powdery mildew. When a powdery mildew spore lands on a leaf, it doesn't germinate in the surface water. I mean, you could just wash the spores off. What it does, though, is that powdery mildew spore sends down a germination tube to get to the water in the interstitial space. And then it becomes systemic in the tissue and makes more spores and spreads. But if you get more calcium uptake, instead of water in the interstitial space, you have calcium pectin. So it's thicker cell walls. So by the time the mold spore is able to get to the water, it dries up and dies. So it's not a fungicide. It's not killing powdery mildew. It's preventing the powdery mildew from getting established and then spreading. So calcium uptake is king. Now, as a side benefit, if you have stronger cells, stronger leaf cells, stronger stems, the vascular system is stronger, the plant's able to take up water and all the other minerals and distribute it all the way through the plant. They'll accumulate to higher levels. That's going to improve the way the plant does photosynthesis and lots of other side benefits. And one last thing with calcium, this is something I spent years researching it. That's why I get excited on this one. I solved some of those mysteries years ago. But anyway, the extra calcium that isn't stored in the cell wall, that making a physical barrier for the powdery mildew and molds, the plant will literally pump those calcium ions into a storage container in the cell. And then if it's there's a hot spot, they're getting a little bit of powdery mildew or mold, the plant senses the chitin in the cell wall of fungus on the surface of the leaf. Plants don't have chitin, they have cellulose. Plant senses it, they say, oh, I'm under attack. The plant will send a signal molecule from the surface of the leaf to the vacuole, open up calcium ion channels inside the cell. Thousands or millions of calcium ions flow into the cell, activate a series of enzymes that create an oxidative burst. That's the plant's first line of defense against the powdery mildew. So there's a physical barrier and a storage of calcium that's only utilized if the plant needs it. In the Netherlands, it's against the law to use any fungicides on food crops. So by using biostimulants that had amino acids, improve the calcium uptake, they reduced losses to powdery mildew to zero, even in the places.
How the hell do you know this? I mean, like when you're in the lab or you're, I don't know, do you look under a microscope? How the hell do you know it's doing this and doing that? It's like it just blows my mind, the amount of science, the amount of detail, the amount of information that you need to know in order to have a great chance of success. If you want to grow killer, crushing it stuff, it's like you gotta educate yourself on this kind of information. And then, yeah, it's good to hear it here, but when it actually happens in the field or in the greenhouse or when you're physically playing with it and go, boy, I hope I remember what Harley said. It's like, how do you even know? How does the average farmer know all of these things to get all the juiciness? It's like, this is how deep it really can go. Not that everybody's going to get that deep, but to be able to at least understand. But it's like, you could just learn this for years, Harley. It's like, that's what I love about this business is or this culture and this plant itself, is that when a new farmer gets out there growing, if they're anybody like me or a lot of people that we talk to or that are in the industry, there's a special connection to this plant, in my opinion, than like no other. And it's just fascinating to me.
Oh, yeah. I love the plant too. I'm with you there. I mean, before it was legal, I was still doing research, but I was doing improving the nutritional quality of food, improving the plant's natural resistance to pest and disease. I was doubling the lycopene content of tomatoes, so they were red all the way through. I was increasing vitamin C by 50%. I was growing gourmet quality of fruits and vegetables early on and teaching people how to do it with plant nutrition. But when I finally was able to, when the laws, at least the state laws at the time, allowed me to grow some plants, I fell in love with cannabis. This is a really special plant. I just enjoy growing it. The aromas, the the colors and the aromas, the terpenes, the medicinal characteristics are it's unique, and there's no substitute out there in plants like cannabis plants. And I understand the attraction from growers. I've worked with growers, for many, many years, but once I started growing those plants myself, it was one of my very favorite plants. And the hemp, I mean, that's exciting too. I mean, because I'm finding, working with the hemp growers, that we were able to grow high terpene, smokable flower in hemp out in Oregon. And it was unbelievable. It was like some of the best marijuana I'd ever seen. The
Wow.
same kind of, the characteristics, but it didn't have the THC. It didn't make you high. It just chilled you out and and you could enjoy sitting there and smoking it. I don't know. Just talking about the plant for a second. One of the mistakes, it's not even a mistake, it's just the market. The breeders were breeding for higher and higher and higher THC content. I knew that was a mistake for the beginning, because then they were choosing only one thing, one molecule, THC. But they were breeding out some of the other characteristics of the plant. And then you take one or two tokes off of that, high THC pot, and you're done. Well, with the smokable hemp, you can sit on your back porch and smoke a whole joint and just enjoy the experience of smoking it.
Yes.
Just enjoy the taste. Just enjoy looking at the clouds and just relaxing for a little while and chilling out. And the effects last for a while. But it doesn't make you so you can't think, or you can't work, or you can't do something else that you want to enjoy with your family later. So that's all I'm going to say about it. But there's
a lot of special goodness
to this plant than just getting high, and I think the breeders are working on it, but there's more work to be done.
Of course. Hey, at this time too, if you don't mind, Harley, I'm going to open it up if anybody has a question on our chat at all. If anybody has a question for Harley, just type your question in, or if you want to, I can open it up so that he can hear the audio.
I'd like to say one thing.
Go ahead.
Before I do it. Okay, phosphorus. We know how it helps flowering. We know how it helps rooting. But if you overdo it with phosphorus, which is typical for the people that have grown medicinal cannabis in the past, overdo it with it, so it gets up to luxury levels, you can spike the amount of THC. So do not overdo it with phosphorus. Also, a phosphorus toxicity shows up as a zinc deficiency. And the zinc is important for making the auxins, some of the growth hormones that will fatten up the buds and keep the roots growing. So just watch it don't use excessive amounts of phosphorus as well. Okay, so go ahead and open it
up. And how about as far as for hemp, if we're looking to put, I know Jonathan had a question, this is one that he had, as far as quality and yield, if we want to really put on some quality, some dense buds, try to build the cannabinoid and terpene profiles to the best of its ability. Some of us, or in the industrial hemp, don't have a luxury to allow this cannabis plant to mature as you would say on a TH side, when the trichomes maybe look a certain way, hitting certain potencies and so forth that you're expecting. Here, depending on that 0.3, right? If you're below it or you're about to go above it, sometimes you can't allow it to go to maturity. And in a lot of cases, we have to harvest before it gets to the perfect goodness that we'd expect to, because of that threshold of THC. Is there any little tips to some new farmers out there to maybe help them build bud density outside of not too much phosphorus at any point throughout, but other than in the beginning and in them first few weeks or first week of flowering? But any little tips or tricks out there that a new farmer could utilize that might really help them on the back end?
Sure. Well, early harvest, you're going to have to do that. I would recommend that once you reach your target levels of CBD with very, very low THC, once you have I got it at 15%. That was my goal. Right then, start your harvest and finish harvesting within 2 weeks. That would be my very first recommendation. The other thing is you want to be smooth out the amount of nitrogen. Remember, if we overdo it with nitrogen, then it's going to delay flowering. We don't want to delay it. We want to bring the flowers early, and we want to harvest early. Now, a lot of the good genetics for hemp, the high CBD hemp out there, are a lot shorter growing season than what we're used to seeing. I was seeing in last season in Oregon where the plants were at 14.5-hour days, 14.5 hours still. They were starting to go to flower. We always talk about 12 and 12, right?
Right.
14.5, they began that process. The medical marijuana plants in the field weren't even close to flowering yet. So because everything's accelerated, we want to give them a nice burst of the nitrogen up front, and then we want to keep that nice, get it up to a point where it's getting close to flower, and then keep it nice and smooth, like a smooth curve right to the end so that it can finish properly. Where in other cannabis production, they would bring the nitrogen up, and then they bring the nitrogen way down very quickly and bring up the phosphorus and potassium. But that'll spike your THC production. You don't want to do that. You want to smooth the curve. You want to keep the stress off the plant. And with that, remember I said kelp and humic acid, 5-to-2 ratio? That stimulates the plant to make 50% more of an enzyme that protects the plant from stress. Heat stress, salt stress, drought stress, UV stress from the sunlight. It'll protect it. The plant will stay green longer and recover faster. Very important with hemp. So if you know a hot time of the season is coming, oh, look, I look at the weather report. Oh, we're going to have a heat wave. Cut back on your fertilizer. Cut that nitrogen in half if you're fertigating. Cut back on your fertilizer, but give it a dose of humic acid and kelp. They'll make 50% more of that plant protection agent, smooth the curve, those spikes, and help you to stay in your numbers.
Wow. In here, down in Alabama, Harley, we get a lot of heat and humidity. And this past year in 2019, it was fairly dry. I mean, we had in some parts of the state, not a lot of rain. And we got to 100+ degree weather, 100, 101, 99, 98 for what felt like months and months, but at least, a good month or so. It was hot, man. I mean, we were out putting greenhouse up, and you're working out there by 9:30. You got to go back in the house again and come back later. So Jonathan had said, is there any special concerns with any excessive heat or humidity?
Yeah, well, one thing with the excessive humidity is the uptake of calcium that we talked about.
Yeah.
If the air is wet, the plant doesn't transpire as much. It's not transpiring, it's not taking up calcium. And so you can get a calcium deficiency even if there's plenty of calcium in your soil. That's where the amino acids would come in to help with the uptake of the calcium. Remember, a soil test tells you what's potentially available to the plant. Your leaf test tells you what the plant is actually taking up. Now, if you can't add amino acids, in fertigating we can. We can just mix glutamic acid and glycine right in with the water, and give it right to the roots. Yay! It's nice. They have control, and with spoon feeding. But if you don't, you definitely want to have an enthusiastic community of the plant growth promoting rhizobacteria and a really good root mass. That will help you get through the drought. Yucca is another thing if you're irrigating. Add yucca extracts. The yucca is a natural surfactant. It breaks the polarity of the water molecule, so the water disperses through the root zone better. It doesn't just flow through the roots and go away. So if the root zone is getting more even watering, it'll get through the drought much more quickly. Silicon supplements too can help. It'll help with the plant continue, because most of the silicon is going to be stored in the roots, which will help with the uptake of water if they're under drought. So those are a few of the things you can do. But as the humidity in particular, It's going to reduce the amount of calcium uptake, some magnesium uptake, maybe even some trace elements like iron and manganese. If that happens, you want the ideal levels of iron and manganese for the plant to be able to turn on the enzymes that make the cannabinoids, such as the CBD or the THC. So if don't get the good transpiration, they'll do it. So anything you can do to stimulate the root growth all the way to from seed to harvest, you'll be able to better take up the water and nutrients, better take up calcium, most important, and not get a deficiency of those trace elements.
I love it. I love it. And, you can go on for hours and hours, man, just talking. I absolutely love it. For people to get a hold of you, I know when we've talked in the past, you still do continuing education classes. You have different series of classes. Is that online, or do people fly out to you? I mean, if people want more information about you to get a hold of you, or if they've got a question or they want to get involved with your classes, I mean, what do they do? How do they get a hold of you? Or tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, email is the best way.
What is it?
Harley, like the motorcycle, HARLEY,
yep.
dot P as in Peter, H as in Harley, T as in Tom. Harley.pht@gmail.com. That's the best way to get hold of me. That's my personal email address. Wow. You send me an email and just say, Harley, when's your next class? I will send you a link, like we have for tonight. You click on it, you can register, take the class. If you have a quick question about what we talked about tonight, send me an email. I'll be happy to answer the question if I can. So I'll send you a link to the catalog of classes. So every time I add a new class or a new time, the catalog automatically updates, so you can go back to whenever you want.
Gotcha. So it's not just on one thing, or you have one class here. You have series of classes, or is it different topics? Like, tell me what you got going on now. What series, or what are you discussing now in your classes?
Now we're just finishing up a series of 12 classes called the Master Growers Short Course, and where we've gone into, we did one whole class on precision fertilizer management, essential elements, a whole hour. We did a class just on biostimulants. We did another class in the series just on compost teas and microbial inoculants, the superstars of the rhizosphere. We did some other classes that were more oriented toward greenhouses, CO2, light, environmental controls, and integrated pest management, improving the plant's natural resistance, pest and disease, identifying pest and disease. In our cannabis and the hemp, there's not a whole lot you can spray. You can't spray the same thing you spray on your corn. You can't spray the same thing you do on cotton or on soybeans. We're not allowed. Right. Very stringent. So we need to grow the healthiest, strongest plants we can. We did a whole 2 classes on IPM and concentrating on the most organic, most benign ways that we can identify and treat common pests and diseases. By the way, if you don't have this book, I don't sell. It's not my book, but hemp
I love it.
diseases and pests. You should have. If you're going to do hemp, buy this book. There's some very good information in here that you'll be able to apply right from the beginning.
Awesome.
But yeah, that's what I'm finishing up. I do have a hemp fertilization plant class coming up on a Saturday in May, and the next series of classes starts April 21st.
So it's harley.pht@gmail.com.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Think of it, Harley.p, sort of like PhD, but with a T instead of a D.
Yes.
PhD.
And by the way, I know that there's many more that you could talk about. We didn't get into kelp, zinc, manganese, all the other stuff, fulvic, humic acid. Mm-hmm. But maybe in the future we can, or if any of the listeners out there want to plug in and get a hold of you, please do it. It's worth the price of admission alone. But for the real serious people that want to understand, it's really the luxury of getting to pick your brain, and it's kind of like that one-on-one scenario, because you're not from what I've understood in the past, it doesn't seem like you have thousands upon thousands of people coming in. Maybe at times you have, but you've really tailored some of these to be very intimate, haven't you?
Oh, I even do private classes with growers, especially if they're doing startup.
Yep.
They don't want to take 12 classes, but they really want to focus in on what they're doing. Then we do it by the hour. So I'll be doing some private classes too. I don't have as much, as of April 1st, I won't have as much time to do private consulting and fly around the country like I have in the past, because one grower in Michigan wants me to on full-time to work with their cultivation staff. But I'll still be able to do my classes and public classes and private classes.
Oh, awesome. Great. Well, I hate to say goodbye because I could be here forever, and hopefully we get a chance to be able to do it again. We'd love it. I love you, man. I've been listening to you for a long time, and we've talked several times, and it's just a treat to have you on because, guys, we haven't even touched the surface for the most part of everything that you talk about. We can go on forever, and it's just fascinating to me. I really appreciate your time. I appreciate a person. I appreciate you for all the amount of time and research that you put into this, because really there's a lot of your content that you give away for free, and it's such good stuff. It's not discounted stuff. It's not, here's a little bit of information to get you into a class. It's like, man, you give a lot of gold away. I really give you a lot of credit for doing that. And that's kind of our philosophy too, for what we have to offer. We just want to provide great content to people. Hopefully they get something out of it. If there's just one thing that one person gets, it was all worth it. But we really love to help people. And I know you do. You absolutely love to help growers. You just have a passion for this plant and for this industry. And I just think you're a great guy. And I just am so glad that you came on and you were able to spend a little bit of your time to at least give us a little flavor of what people should know, what they should be doing. And hopefully we can do something like this again.
Yeah, I'd love to come back later. It's really all about helping the plant reach its true genetic potential. And that's all we can do as growers. If I can help growers not make the rookie mistakes, I can help them to do what they're doing just a little better, we all win.
Yeah.
Thank you
for having me on. And it really is that culture too, isn't it? Whether it's the THC side, hemp side, whatever you want to call it, but in the cannabis business in itself or industry, the culture is just beautiful. Whether you go to Colorado, California, you've spent a lot of time in Oregon, Washington State, all over the world, Spain, Italy.
California.
Where?
Oh, California. Worked with a lot of growers.
Yeah, so imagine the culture there compared to just an industrial hemp state. When you have full recreational or you have medical on the cannabis side, the culture, these people are surely, outside of just cannabis, true organic farmers, farm to table concept. Let me help you out. Let me lend a brother a hand. It's like the culture there is just so much different than any other culture that I've experienced in the plant industry. And the people are just beautiful people. They just want to care about the earth. They just love everybody. They want to grow great medicine, and they want to be able to help people. And I just love it.
Yeah, I feel privileged to be part of this industry and to contribute. And I'm thankful that the government finally has opened up just a little bit to allow us to explore the benefits of this wonderful plant.
That's exactly right. For it being suppressed for so long, or not being able to have a lot of different individuals and universities and scientists and doctors and everybody else legally be able to touch it, it is opening up that. And I think we'll get there. We'll get there across the board at some day. And I think it'll happen, in a shorter time period than longer. And I think it'll definitely happen in our lifetime. And so it'll be neat to see when we get there.
Well, it's a thrill. A lot of the farmers that we're talking to tonight are in Alabama. Who would have figured? Who would have known?
Isn't that amazing?
That is, makes my heart feel good, because this is something that all of us, we want to try to improve the quality of life of people and our neighbors and the people that are sick that need the help, relieve suffering, and to make the world just that much of a better place. What else can we do? That's why we're here.
Yeah. And, for your info too, we just passed in the House medical So it's got to go through the Senate. These guys are, I swear, I just thought, Alabama and Mississippi, in my mind, would have been the last
the
state. Now,
last two
hopefully it
states.
goes through.
Well,
But
hopefully.
they're really doing it. It seems like they're doing it right. It's very interesting what's in the bill. It's not just, only one thing qualifies you. It's not loose, but there's about 15 different scenarios or uh, issues that they're looking to potentially allow scripts to be written for medical cannabis, and
Mhm.
and it's going to be interesting, and I think it's going to go through. But it's just showing that these states are somewhat becoming more and more open-minded through many, many reasons. Someday it will. And my dream or hope would be that the fighting against the cancers and all the other issues that people have and illnesses and diseases that we hopefully do recognize based off of science and the medical field that's out there, really looking at this stuff and determining that it might find, or we find out 20 years from now or a month from now that it does cure a specific form of cancer, or it does do this. What a beautiful way to use a plant that was naturally here forever, that we buried cannabis in pharaoh's tombs, yet you can't, consume it in some states. It's just unbelievable. And at one point was required by the government to grow. So you can
Yeah.
get in the whole end of that, whether it's politics, big pharma, who's in the game. We all know what the situation is. But we'll get there.
Mhm.
And we just hope that and wish that anybody and everybody could play. Now, from us, for instance, in business, in order to make an actual business out of it, an exchange of money, then licensing and whatever requirements, proposed revenue for taxation, all the things of why this industry isn't even here. If it didn't make the government any money, it would be illegal across the board, or it would be legal and nobody would have an interest in selling it. But because it's a very hot commodity forever, and there's big money in it, whether it's underground or above ground, they have to figure out how to tax it right. And with the hype of CBD and how big it's been in the last, say, 5 years or so, it's I don't know how you can slow that momentum down. I think you can regulate it appropriately based off of FDA, but I don't know how you're going to just shut the cannabis industry down.
No, it's not going to be shut down. It's we've as a scientist and as a botanist, it's a medicinal herb. I mean, just because someone wrote a piece of paper and said it's not a medicinal herb. It's not. The truth is the truth. Science stands. It's been known as a medicinal herb for centuries, and it always will be. And it's kind of, I think, a travesty of justice that we've regulated out something that was put on this planet to help people, or that's been here to help the quality of life of human beings for many, many years. So yeah, it's coming back, and it will be, and I'm glad to be part of that, the education, and not just propaganda.
Amen. Amen, brother. Well, hey, listen, we love you. Anytime you want to come on, we'd love to have you. And so hopefully we'll be able to do this again. I appreciate your time taking it out of your busy schedule to talk with us for an hour or so, and to really focus on a lot of the people that have been listening in, and in the future that'll be watching this and tuning in. You're a big help to the community. You're a big help to the culture, to the industry. So you just got to keep doing what you're doing. Thank you guys for listening. And if you need anything, reach out to us. You know how to get a hold of Harley, and also in the description, we'll have it as well, so you'll know how to get a hold of them. I'm Lou Consoli from Unique Botanicals, and we'll talk to you later.